A mother standing in the kitchen, suddenly possessing 8 eyes and the trunk of an elephant. Winged horses descending from an overcast sky. Snakes writhing violently beneath the bedsheets. And worms eating methodically through the flesh of your own hands.
These were not nightmares. This is exactly what the children of Kalachi saw while they were wide awake, right before their brains abruptly shut down.
Welcome to the Akmola region of northern Kazakhstan, a vast, unforgiving, and deeply isolated stretch of the Eurasian steppe. Here lies the settlement of Kalachi, a quiet agricultural village populated by a few hundred residents, predominantly of ethnic Russian and German descent. The name of the district is derived from a local Kazakh term, Akmola. It translates ominously to the White Tomb. And beginning in the spring of 2013, this remote village began to live up to its terrifying namesake. Without any warning, the residents of Kalachi began falling asleep. But this was no ordinary fatigue. It was a mass, synchronized comatose state, an epidemic of sudden unconsciousness that baffled the medical world. The onset was violent in its abruptness. A woman named Lyubov Belkova succumbed to intense drowsiness while working at a local market, waking up 4 days later in a hospital ward. A man named Viktor Kazachenko fell unconscious while riding his motorcycle down the highway. Victims would suddenly begin slurring their words, swaying violently, and experiencing severe double vision. And then, they would simply drop to the ground, entirely unresponsive. Once unconscious, the victims would not wake up for hours. In extreme cases, they slept for 6 straight days. During these prolonged, terrifying slumbers, sufferers appeared conscious for only fleeting twilight moments, waking in a bizarre daze just long enough to eat, drink, or use the bathroom, before collapsing back into the void. When they finally awoke permanently, the nightmare continued. They suffered total memory loss of the event, remembering absolutely nothing about their lost time. This erasure of the self was accompanied by profound weakness and agonizing headaches. At least 150 people, nearly a quarter of the town's entire population, succumbed to the illness across multiple waves. It struck indiscriminately, men, women, and children. But the anomaly wasn't just putting people to sleep. It was actively hijacking and altering their biology. Some male victims awoke from their multi-day comas, experiencing an aggressive, insatiable sexual desire that lasted for weeks. A bizarre, physiological hyper-arousal that left local paramedics completely bewildered. And the phenomenon was not limited to human neurology. A local resident's cat, named Marquis, suddenly went berserk. The animal began violently attacking the walls and furniture before falling asleep and snoring loudly, like a grown man, for an entire day. The global press descended on the anomaly, broadcasting the mystery of the town that couldn't stay awake to a terrified world. By early 2014, curiosity had mutated into outright panic. The Kazakh government, terrified of a growing uncontainable epidemic, dispatched highly specialized teams of scientists, doctors, and somnologists to the village. Over 7,000 individual scientific tests were conducted. Investigators relentlessly tested the air, the municipal water, the local food supply, the soil, and the blood, hair, and nails of the victims. Initial theories were rapidly dismantled. Doctors suspected counterfeit vodka, but children who had never touched alcohol were falling asleep at their school desks. They suspected mass psychological illness, a localized hysteria similar to the psychosomatic Bin Laden itch of 2002. But that theory shattered when an outsider named Alexei Gom visited his mother-in-law in Kalachi and instantly fell victim to the comatose state, despite having no prior psychological exposure to the town's anxiety. With viruses, bacteria, and psychology officially ruled out, desperate investigators turned their eyes toward the horizon. Just 600 meters from Kalachi sits Krasnogorsk, a rotting, brutalist Soviet ghost town. From the 1960s until the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, Krasnogorsk was a booming, highly secretive hub for the USSR's nuclear machine. It housed the Tseliny Mining and Chemical Combine, a massive underground uranium extraction operation designated merely as Mailbox 5175. When the Soviet Empire fell, the extraction stopped. The deep mines were abandoned, allowed to flood with groundwater, and sealed. Krasnogorsk's population plummeted from 6,500 down to a meager 130. Investigators wondered, was the toxic legacy of the Cold War finally seeping out of the earth?
Given the proximity of a massive uranium mine, radiation poisoning seemed like the obvious, terrifying answer. But when scientists measured the radiation levels in over 7,000 local houses, the concentrations were entirely normal. Furthermore, radiation causes cellular mutation, catastrophic organ damage, and cancer. It does not cause an entire village to simply faint and snore. But in the summer of 2015, the Kazakh government made a triumphant global announcement. The mystery of Sleepy Hollow, they claimed, was officially solved. The culprit wasn't radiation, it was a massive, invisible cloud of carbon monoxide. Officials from the National Nuclear Center of Kazakhstan reported a highly specific sequence of events. When the uranium mines were shut down in the 90s, they were allowed to flood with natural groundwater. Deep inside these flooded subterranean shafts, massive wooden structures used for flooring and structural fixtures began to rot over the decades. The state claimed that this decaying wood, submerged in water, generated massive pressurized pockets of carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons. According to the government, these invisible gas clouds periodically seeped out of the earth and drifted directly into Kalachi. Because carbon monoxide binds to human blood 200 times more effectively than oxygen, it slowly starved the villagers' brains of oxygen, forcing them into a state of asphyxiated hibernation. Case closed, the town was evacuated. The anomaly was filed away as an environmental fluke. But there was a problem, a massive, undeniable problem that international medical experts simply couldn't ignore. If the villagers were suffering from acute, coma-inducing carbon monoxide poisoning, their blood tests should have shown dangerously elevated levels of carboxyhemoglobin. They didn't. The early tests were completely clean. Furthermore, carbon monoxide is primarily a byproduct of active combustion. The mines beneath the town had been completely inactive and freezing cold for over 20 years. And perhaps the most glaring, impossible plot hole of all, the residents of Krasnogorsk, the ghost town located directly on top of the supposedly gas-leaking mine, never suffered a single case of the sleeping sickness. The gas cloud theory was geographically and biologically impossible. In 2020, years after the world had forgotten Kalachi, an epidemiologist named Byron Crape from Nazarbayev University blew the closed case wide open. He bypassed the air and instead looked directly at the ground. Through long-term scientific pattern modeling, Professor Crape's team systematically ruled out food, chronic diseases, and local habits. They analyzed the incidence density and discovered one terrifying common denominator. Every single resident who fell victim to the sleeping sickness drank their water from the exact same source, an underground pump owned by a local resident who pumped the water up and sold it to his fellow villagers. Because this specific water cost money, residents didn't waste it on their animals. The pets and livestock drank from the free local river. That is exactly why the animals were spared the comas, save for a few indoor pets like Marky the cat, who lapped from the kitchen tap. Today, Kalachi is effectively a ghost town. Seeking to avoid further international scrutiny, the government successfully relocated the vast majority of the population. Once the villagers were removed from the contaminated water source, the sleeping sickness vanished instantly. No one has fallen asleep since. The anomaly has been contained. But deep beneath the frozen Kazakh steppe, in the flooded, pitch-black veins of the old Soviet Empire, the barrels are still rusting,
Until next time, keep your eyes open. You're watching the Anomaly Index.